Welcome, everyone. This is our fifth of our six-part series. And tonight's topic is managing addictions with breathwork. And to get us breathing around this topic, Sherry's going to start us off with a little opening exercise.
Okay. So what I'm going to start us with is just settling into our breath, and then I'm going to read a poem about being a tribe. And that is because my own addiction journey would not have been successful if I didn't have this tribe in particular, but other tribes in my life as well. So if you just want to relax and settle into your breath, that nice even breath, inhale, exhale, just connecting with yourself, the earth around you. And the poem is called We Are a Tribe by Alberto Rios. We plant seeds in the ground and dreams in the sky, hoping that someday the roots of one will meet the upstretched limbs of the other. It has not happened yet. We share the sky, all of us, the whole world. Together, we are a tribe of eyes that look upward, even as we stand on uncertain ground. The earth beneath us moves, quiet and wild, its boundaries shifting, its muscles wavering. The dream of the sky is indifferent to all of this, impervious to borders, fences, and reservations. The sky is our common home, the place we all live. There we are in the world together. The dream of the sky requires no passport. Blue will not be fenced. Blue will not be a crime. Look up, stay a while. Let your breathing slow. Know that you always have them here. And as we continue to breathe, those nice, slow, even breaths, just connecting with our tribe here, knowing that we have a safe container for sharing and growing, that we are united and bonded with one another. And then just a couple deep clearing breaths, and welcome everyone.
So tonight, Sherry is going to talk about hard addictions and share some inspiring parts of her own story. And I've been looking forward to listening to and hearing Sherry. I was thinking about this earlier today. I have met a lot of people in the breathwork world as the co-director of the Global Professional Breathwork Alliance. It's part of my job to stay connected with breathwork activity all around the world. I know of no one with more direct experience in addictions and who has used breath work with them than Sherry Ward. So I consider us all to be fortunate to have her presentation tonight.
Thank you. I think it's going to start out being a little bit academic. There's just some things about addiction that I wanted to share right up front. So one is the definition that one of the national organizations on addiction uses. And it says that addiction is a treatable chronic medical disease involving complex interactions among brain circuits, genetics, environment, and life experiences. People with addiction use substances and engage in behaviors that become compulsive and often continue despite harmful consequences. And I think two pieces that I want to add to that is that addiction is chronically relapsing. So people, especially suffering from drugs and alcohol, it is expected that at some point in time they can and will relapse. It's not mandatory, but it happens. And the other thing is that it is a chronic disease. It's not a moral failing. It's not that the individual has a lack of character. And that's often been a debate in the past. So I wanted to clarify that. 9 of the 11 criteria for an addiction diagnosis are behavioral, and only 2 are actually physiological. So addiction is a lot about the behaviors, and that's what becomes very complicated, I think, as people look at it and say, it's not a disease, it's just bad behavior. But the truth is, it is way more complex than that, with the neurobiology and everything involved in it. There are key risk factors, and that includes genetics. If we have a family history of addiction, we actually have a 40 to 60% chance of developing an addiction once we take alcohol or drugs into our body. I always tell people it's basic 50-50 whether you'll develop an addiction or not if you have a family history. Other things that play into it are home and family. What's the family value around the use of substances? It's amazing to me when I do like my clinical intakes. And I have young people who come in who say they had their first drink with their parent. They smoked their first joint with their parent. I even had one young woman who used her first heroin IV with her mother. So family values and family stories around use are really predictive for risk for developing addiction. In my family, my parents like to have parties. So I remember Mr. Gerstead in my mom's wig dancing in the living room. And I'm like, a little kid going, boy, I can't wait till I'm big enough to have fun like that. So alcohol and fun were really paired together from a very young age. Social, what is it like when we're in school? What is it like? What are our friends like? What are the things that we're doing and engaging in? I grew up here in Burlington, and by the time we were sophomores and juniors in high school, we were in some farm field with a keg of beer drinking. And that was pretty much what we did. So that again, that real two things happened. One is that that's what everybody was doing, or at least everybody I chose to be with. And the other thing is that neurologically, fun and alcohol get paired together, like actually wired together in your brain. And often you'll hear neuroscientists say what fires together wires together. So we have this actual wiring for me of fun and alcohol. And so that was really predictive for me. How early we start drinking, our prefrontal cortex isn't developed until we're like probably for women, maybe 22, 23, for men, 25, 26. So we have an immature prefrontal cortex that's still developing, and we're adding alcohol to that and really interfering with some of that development. And then how available is it, this alcohol for us or the drugs? And unfortunately, availability is not a problem for either or. So that's some of the basic things I wanted to share. I sent a couple things in the form of handouts, and they were just kind of as an FYI, what are the categories? So the things that I talked about, the 11, there's a checklist in the categories talking about the behaviors that go with addiction. So importantly, it's how much am I using? Can I control it? There are very negative consequences to my use. Am I continuing to use if there are negative consequences? So that is in the handouts. And then depending on how many of those criteria we meet, then it talks about whether we're mild, moderate, or severe in our addiction. And the handout I'm going to bring up now is basically with the addiction iceberg, what we're seeing, and what other people see is our behaviors. So they're looking at our compulsive use. They're looking at the fact that when I drink, I'm not a nice person. I fight with my husband. I'm not a good friend. I call in late for work. There's all kinds of other behaviors. I'm in legal trouble, having issues with that. So that's what people see or what others see for our addiction. What lies underneath that is the stuff that's really important, and the stuff that I think that we work on in breath work, and the stuff that really leads to long-term healing from addictions. So above the iceberg, that's where like counseling and therapy, where different kinds of things can help stop us from drinking or using drugs. So people will possibly go for a medical detox if they're a heavy drinker and they're at risk for developing DTs or physiological problems as a result of their withdrawal. They might go to inpatient treatment, which could be short term or maybe up to 28 days. Residential treatment can be anywhere from 28 days to 6 months. Intensive outpatient is like kind of in partial hospitalization, or you're at home, but you're spending time either at the facility or on Zoom, doing classes, learning more about the addiction itself. And then regular counseling in an office, and then peer support groups, and there's lots of peer support groups out there, and those all are very beneficial in that upper level of addiction, especially in the beginning. Recovery is a long process. It just doesn't happen overnight. So you can be in a program for 6 months, but the work continues forever, essentially, afterwards. And so 12-step programs, other recovery programs, all help with that stuff that then falls below the tip of the iceberg, and working on that. That's where I think that breath work really comes into play. I'll just kind of go into my own story, and then how breath work has been really an important part of my own journey and how I use it with clients. I think that I was set up for addiction pretty pretty from conception on. It is very strong on my mother's side of the family, so the genetics was there. If as we looked at those things that were on the bottom of the iceberg, low self-esteem, a lot of fear, a lot of guilt and shame, a history of some childhood trauma, some sexual abuse, and so by the time I got to that age of being 16, 17, also that early initiation, drinking became a way to be more social and have more fun. I was quite functional, I'm going to say, in that I was able to go to college and become a nurse and have a great career in nursing for quite a while. And then addiction gets the best of you. I was unable to regulate myself emotionally. Once I had a husband and a family and kids and a whole bunch of things to manage, it became really, really difficult to do that and still drink. And drinking was probably the priority because it kind of numbed the chaos for me. And as a result of all that, I ended up losing my nursing license and getting an OWI and losing my marriage and developing a lot more guilt and shame around all of those things. I think for women, it is especially, well, it's difficult for anyone to struggle with addiction, but I think there's a difference for a woman, especially a woman alcoholic. If a husband stops at the bar and has a few drinks with his buddies, it's okay. But if a mom's drinking, there's a lot of social stigma around that. And so I really struggled with that. When we do our body themes, I'm a steadfast supportive, and it was that people pleasing, taking care of everyone, and then falling short really increased guilt and shame for me as well. That being said, then finally getting to the place where once I lost my nursing license, I really had to start facing the addiction. I think I was in denial, thinking, oh, it's because I had a difficult son, and my difficult son made my marriage difficult. And there were a million reasons why I thought that I was drinking, but none of them were really that I was an alcoholic. And so denial is really, really hard to break through right at this moment. I have a brother who's struggling with alcoholism, and he's just a phenomenal guy, traveled the world, had a great career, but his alcoholism has really caused a lot of damage. It's been over a year that we've really been in conversation with him about it, and his denial has been so strong up until like a week ago. There was just finally a little crack in that denial where we maybe now we can start having some serious discussions about recovery. But denial's a defense mechanism that we engage for a lot of reasons: to cover guilt and shame, to hide our failure, to maintain some sense of self. It's a safety thing for us. And so it's super hard to get through denial sometimes. And I think the more proud you are, the more you want to maintain your sense of self in the world, the harder it is to get through that denial process. Along with the denial then was the other piece that came with addiction for me was isolation. Pretty soon I love to travel, I love to be with people, And as my addiction progressed, I became really isolated. Pretty soon it was my 12 pack and myself in front of a television in as little contact with the outside world as possible. And it's a really sad place to be, feeling very disconnected. You're lonely. The only person you're talking to is yourself. I had a fella say one time at a meeting that if he's alone in his head, he's in very bad company. And so we need that check and balance of other people in our life. And that's one of my hugest fears today with clients is that after COVID, so many people are so isolated. They're not getting the support and the help that they need. So as I finally got the grasp of the fact that I needed to do something different with my life, I did what people typically do. Well, partly because I had no WI, I had to go to counseling. So, counseling works with those behaviors, helping me identify my triggers, giving me some tools to not pick up the next drink. I also found a program called Women for Sobriety, and I also went to AA meetings. I really preferred Women for Sobriety just because it was very positive. It kind of met women where they're at. I think it's a great program, and I wish they had one for men as well, because I like it and I like the concept behind it. So Women for Sobriety really helped me move forward until I could get stable in a job. And then I'd heard about this guy named Jim Morningstar from a woman when I was doing a job interview. And I said, as soon as I get my nursing license back, I'm calling Jim Morningstar. So I called Jim Morningstar, and a week later, I was in the School of Spiritual Psychology and went to that first breathwork training in 2009, and that changed my life and changed my recovery from there on using breathwork. And I think that it changed it in a way that I couldn't even identify, say that this was a changing moment. But one of my commitments after that first breathwork training at Cedar Valley in 2009 was to do conscious connected breathing every night. So every night before I went to bed, or when I went to bed, I would do conscious connected breathing until I fell asleep. And I started to notice that things were changing. I was less triggered by everyday life. I was able to make better decisions, to set priorities, because I was really good at complicating my life and still am, but significant improvement over the years. And I made a commitment then at that breathwork training that I was going to go into counseling and become a therapist and eventually use breathwork in my therapy practice as well. I have used that and done multiple breathwork sessions myself, dealing with who I am underneath, dealing with the guilt and shame, dealing with the isolation. I am really serious about the power of this community and in all of the forms that it comes in, whether it was in the School of Spiritual Psychology, whether it's at each of the individual Cedar Valleys, or all the opportunities I have to meet with people from the community. It has become just such an important part of my life and connection, not only to other people, but to myself as well, and also to my spirituality. So, using it in practice, what I do is I like to get people to initially focus on their bodies. So, that is really the primary thing that I start with, is just really having people connect with their body. And I find a lot that people have used their bodies merely as machines, that it's a vehicle to get them from this place to that place, but that there's really not a mind body connection. And so getting them focused then on their body and having them start to have that connection to their physical body is my first step, and a very important step. And then depending on the individual, a lot of work on the root chakra and the second chakra as well, because that seems to be the place for addictions in general. Initially, a lot of people in recovery need to create a new foundation. There's been a lot of destruction of relationships, possibly housing, career, and just having them have that ability to really become grounded and connect in that first chakra and then kind of dealing with shame and being able to start figuring out who they are again and moving forward. In Women for Sobriety, then the focus is on standing in your own power and moving forward from there. So then we kind of just really move through the whole chakra system, actually becoming empowered. And then self-forgiveness, recognizing that we have to forgive ourselves, that we can't keep going to the past, that staying in the past keeps us sick. So whatever forgiveness has to happen, whether it's for ourselves or for others. So really, I'll focus the breath on the heart. If there's a lot of anger and resentment, my new therapeutic approach is I have damn it dolls, and so I'll have them beat the damn it dolls while they're in session. And that really kind of starts to loosen the energy and helps them get activated. And then really works on helping them release that energy that's stored. Moving through, having a voice again. People really have either been aggressive or just totally had no voice at all, didn't know how to express themselves. And so helping that through the breath work as well, kind of really focusing on, I love it. Like, oh gosh, one of the clients the other day said, Sherry, I'm not going to do that. And I went, yay, yay, I'm glad you're not going to do that. Just giving people, having them start to feel empowered and use their voice and say, no, I'm not going to go there again. And really moving from that. The spiritual piece, when I talk about spirituality, which is a huge part of recovery, it's foundational in 12-step programs and less talked about in Women for Sobriety, but still really it's a natural, I think it's just a natural part of recovery. If you're really doing recovery, is eventually it becomes an important aspect of it. And how I talk about it is it can either be a religion, it can be a philosophy, it can be what you want for yourself, but recognizing that there's something greater than us and we're striving to be our highest good. So, whatever our highest good is. I do a lot of physical touch with permission and consent, as always. And I do that for a couple of reasons. One is I have a lot of criminal offenders who have maybe been incarcerated, and to have a non-sexual human touch, I think is really healing for them to have that connection. So again, I always have to bear in mind who they are and what their journey's been. But I do find that touch is really, really important, and especially a non-sexual loving touch from another human being, I think is just really key for a lot of them. So that's a really important piece for me in working with the clients. So I think that breath work falls under the complementary medicine, recognizing that there's a place for therapy throughout the process, but there's so much more than that, and getting to these things that are all underneath the tip of the iceberg. And I think that what we do in breath work is really key to helping people work through the traumas and being able to be comfortable with themselves, being able to connect their mind and body. And, there's a lot of other things. I highly recommend yoga, also another mind body, Tai Chi, Qigong, acupuncture, massage. All of these are just so beneficial to people in recovery as they move forward. So I think all of us in the different practices that we have, we can bring so much to clients. Recognizing where they're at, being able to provide that safe space for them, allowing them to share their story, opening doorways, creating that crack in denial, offering them, is this what you want for your life? If we have clients coming to us who are having relationship difficulties, career difficulties, legal difficulties, and we have a sense based on what they've shared with us that it's related to alcohol or drugs, being able to softly guide them and let them come up with solutions to what might be. But I think by just saying, is this where you want your life to be? Jim worked with my husband and I at one point in time, and I remember him saying my husband wasn't necessarily an alcoholic, but he drank in the evenings and that bothered me. And I remember Jim brilliantly saying to him, what are you cheating yourself out of when you have that drink? And I think sometimes we look at the drink as a way to kind of numb us for the evening or to have more fun or to disconnect, it's whatever things it is. But we're also cheating ourselves out of things when we substitute connection with human beings, connection with our life source, connection with life in general by using a substance. And so I think that, that was just a brilliant question is what are we cheating ourselves out of when we have that drink or use that drug? And so that's just another way that we can support our clients. Like, what would life look like? What are you cheating yourself out of when this is the path? And so just lots of gentle ways to guide people. It's hard to know exactly how far we should push if pushing is absolutely necessary. When you see somebody who is truly destroying their body with the alcohol, it may be a time where you look at local resources or offer resources to people. We always walk that fine line of allowing them to find their own solution, but heartier nudge in a direction if we see like true physical destruction, emotional destruction in their lives. I hope
That's
that was
great.
helpful.
Oh, that's great, Sherry. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I have been impressed in the past and still am impressed with your commitment to sharing healing in our world, in our community, Sherry. There have been many circumstances, just pops into my head right now, where you would drive all the way up to Green Bay as I was presenting to the counselors of the Oneida Nation, and you'd drive every day all the way across the state just to assist in that process. I'm thankful for your sharing your personal story with us. Thank you so much for all that you've shared.